The desert awoke slowly, as if the sands themselves were reluctant to stir from the night's cool embrace. The first light of dawn spilled across the endless horizon, washing the dunes in pale gold and soft rose. In the distance, where the sky seemed to melt into the earth, a caravanserai stood in stillness, its ancient stone walls touched gently by the coming sun. Inside its sheltered courtyard, life began to stir. Camels, heavy-lidded and calm, shifted their weight upon folded legs. Their broad, padded feet pressed into the dust as they groaned softly, protesting the early hour. The faint jingle of metal harnesses rang out like sleepy chimes. Traders, wrapped in long cloaks against the fading chill, moved with practiced ease, their footsteps crunching softly on the worn stone ground. A pot of tea bubbled quietly over glowing coals, releasing curls of fragrant steam. The smell of dried mint leaves, mixed with the sharper hint of cardamom, drifted through the air. Around the pot, a few weary travelers sat close, warming their hands as the thin warmth of fire kissed their palms. No one spoke loudly, voices here were hushed, as if in respect for the dawn itself. Words carried like secrets, drifting away before they could disturb the calm of the morning. The caravan leader, an older man with a silver beard and eyes that had witnessed countless roads, walked slowly among his companions. He checked the knots tied to saddlebags, pulled gently at the ropes securing crates of spices and bales of silk. His hands were steady, his movements patient. He had done this every day of his life, guiding caravans along roads that stretched from desert to mountain, from river to city, from one horizon to the next. Beyond the walls of the caravanserai, the desert stretched wide and eternal. The sand shimmered faintly with dew, a fleeting gift of the night's cool breath. In that moment, before the sun grew fierce, the desert seemed kind, even gentle. Tiny tracks of lizards and desert foxes patterned the dunes, soon to be erased by the shifting winds. A young traveler, new to the road, leaned against a low wall, gazing out at the horizon. His eyes were filled with wonder, though also a trace of unease. The road ahead promised beauty, but also hardship, and he knew this journey would test his spirit. The old merchant noticed his gaze and smiled faintly, saying nothing. There was no need for words, the road itself would become his teacher. As the first rim of the sun lifted above the dunes, light spilled into the courtyard, painting the walls in glowing amber. The chatter of morning grew a little louder. Traders exchanged greetings, their voices carrying the warmth of shared journeys. Someone began humming a tune, low and steady, and soon another voice joined, weaving harmony into the stillness. The camels were coaxed to their feet, their long legs unfolding awkwardly, their bodies swaying like ships on the tide. One by one, they rose, until the courtyard was alive with movement. Crates of cinnamon and pepper, rolls of Chinese silk, jars of dried fruit, and leather pouches of precious stones were loaded onto their broad backs. Each item carried not only weight, but stories, stories of distant lands, of markets buzzing with voices in a dozen tongues, of hands that had traded goods with laughter or suspicion, of journeys past and journeys yet to come. A child darted among the camels, laughing softly as he tried to mimic their loping steps. His mother called him back gently, her voice soft as silk, but her smile betrayed her amusement. Even here, on the threshold of long travels, life carried its little moments of joy. The gates of the caravanserai opened slowly, their wooden beams groaning like old storytellers. Beyond them lay the wide desert, painted in new light, as though a fresh page in an endless book. The leader lifted his hand, signaling the start of the journey. One by one, the camels began their march, their padded feet pressing deep into sand, leaving tracks that the wind would soon erase. The travelers followed, their footsteps blending with the rhythm of the caravan. A hush fell over them, not from fear, but from awe. To step upon this road was to walk not only across distance, but across time itself. Countless feet had passed this way before, traders carrying spices from India, glass from Rome, silk from China, and tales that traveled faster than the goods themselves. As the caravan moved farther from the walls, the desert air grew warmer. The sun, climbing higher, promised a long day ahead. Yet in that first hour, the road was serene. The sand seemed endless, but the travelers carried within them the certainty that the path was alive, connecting them to places they had never seen but already felt within their hearts. Birds circled above, their wings glinting in sunlight, watching the procession from the open sky. The young traveler looked back once, at the fading silhouette of the Caravanserai, its walls now glowing like a memory. Then he turned forward, letting the rhythm of footsteps and the swaying of camels lull him into the steady calm of the road. The desert hummed softly, though no sound could be traced. It was the hum of silence, of wind brushing gently across the dunes, of sand shifting beneath the march of the caravan, of breaths blending into the vast expanse. It was a silence that carried peace, reminding each traveler that the road was not to be conquered, but embraced. With each step, the caravan sank deeper into the heart of the Silk Road. The horizon stretched before them, infinite and gentle, carrying the promise of stories yet to unfold. And so the day began, not with noise or haste, but with serenity, as if the world itself whispered a blessing upon the travelers. The caravan left the safety of the Caravanserai as the morning sun rose higher, painting the horizon with a golden warmth. The gates closed behind them with a heavy sound, and now only the road stretched ahead, a thin line cutting across the endless desert. The air shimmered with heat even in the early hours, and the world seemed to slow down under the weight of the rising day. The merchants adjusted the scarves around their heads, the cloth protecting them from both sun and drifting sand. Camels, patient and steady, walked with sure steps, their long shadows stretching across the dunes. The bells tied around their necks jingled gently, a soft rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the journey. Each step stirred the dust, yet no one hurried. Time felt different here. On this road, there was no rushing, only moving forward, slowly, deliberately, like the pulse of the desert itself. The landscape changed with each passing mile. The sand dunes rose and fell like waves of a silent sea, endless and shimmering. The colors shifted as the sun climbed, turning from pale gold to fiery orange, then to a bright, blinding white. Shadows played tricks on the eyes, creating shapes that seemed alive, distant towers of sand, the illusion of water glimmering in the distance, only to fade when approached. Yet the travelers knew better. They trusted the marks of the trail, faint signs left by those who had walked this path before them. Children rode atop the camels, swaying gently with the movement of the animals. Their laughter broke the stillness, light and cheerful, even as the adults marched quietly. Stories were sometimes told to pass the time. An older man at the front of the caravan spoke of distant lands, of cities with walls so high they touched the sky, of markets so vast they stretched farther than the eye could see. The younger ones listened with wide eyes, their imaginations painting pictures brighter than the desert sun. Around noon, the heat grew stronger, pressing down on them. The desert became silent, as if even the wind had retreated into hiding. The group slowed and eventually paused, gathering beneath a cluster of palm trees that rose unexpectedly from the sand. An oasis, small but precious, greeted them with the gift of shade. The camels knelt down, grateful for rest, while travelers filled their water skins and washed their faces with cool water from the spring. The air here was softer, carrying the faint scent of greenery and damp earth, a contrast to the dry vastness outside. Some lay back in the sand, staring at the sky, where a hawk circled lazily. Others shared dates and bread, the simple food of travelers. The silence was comforting, broken only by the crackle of a small fire where tea was prepared. The tea was poured slowly, its steam rising in delicate curls, carrying with it a fragrance of leaves brought from faraway mountains. Each sip was like a quiet promise, a reminder of home, of peace, of simple joys. When the heat softened again, they resumed their journey. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with softer shades. The desert, once harsh and blinding, now glowed with warm amber light. Shadows lengthened, stretching across the sands like dark rivers. The air cooled, and a breeze returned, carrying with it a sense of relief. The travelers walked with renewed energy, their conversations growing more lively as the day slipped into evening. As they moved deeper into the desert, they passed weathered stones that marked ancient paths. Some bore carvings, symbols left by those who had walked this very road centuries ago. These markings were a reminder that the Silk Road was not new, that countless feet had crossed these lands before, carrying dreams, stories, and goods that shaped the world. The travelers touched the stones, a silent gesture of respect, before continuing onward. Night drew near, and with it came a change in the desert. The heat of the day faded quickly, replaced by a chill that crept across the sand. The caravan found a place to rest, a flat stretch of land where they set up tents. Fires were lit, their glow flickering against the darkness. The stars began to appear, one by one, until the sky was filled with countless lights, stretching endlessly above them. Around the fire, stories continued. A woman spoke of silk, soft, flowing fabric that shimmered like water. She described how it was made, the delicate work of tending silkworms, the careful weaving of threads. Another told of spices, cinnamon, cardamom, saffron, fragrances that could transform simple food into a feast, scents that reminded one of distant lands. As the stories unfolded, the desert night seemed to listen, holding every word in its vast silence. The children dozed off first, wrapped in blankets, their faces peaceful under the starlight. The camels rested quietly, their bodies casting long shadows near the fires. The adults lingered a while longer, their conversations soft, voices blending with the crackling fire and the whisper of the wind. Soon, sleep found them too. The desert stretched around them, silent and eternal, but within the circle of the caravan, there was warmth, comfort, and serenity. Tomorrow, the road would call again, carrying them farther across golden sands. But for now, under the gentle gaze of the stars, there was only rest, and the dream of new horizons. The caravan stirred awake with the first pale light of dawn, when the desert sky shifted from deep indigo to the tender glow of rose and gold. The fires from the night before had burned down to faint embers, and the travelers moved quietly, their footsteps soft on the sand. The air was cool, almost cold, but they welcomed it, for they knew the sun would soon rise high and remind them of its power. The camels were loaded once again, their broad backs carrying bundles of silk, wool, spices, and dried fruit. Bells jingled gently, announcing the beginning of another day's passage. The leader raised his hand, and the long line began to move forward, slowly weaving its way through the desert's endless folds. By midday, a glimmer of green appeared in the distance, breaking the monotony of the golden sands. The sight of palms swaying gently in the breeze lifted everyone's spirits. Whispers spread through the caravan, an oasis, water, shade, rest. Children pointed eagerly, their voices carrying excitement, while even the tired camels seemed to sense the promise of relief. As they drew closer, the desert opened to reveal a hidden jewel, a wide stretch of trees clustered around pools of water that sparkled under the sunlight. Birds flitted between the branches, their wings catching the light, while the sound of trickling water filled the air like a song. It felt almost unreal, as though the earth itself had decided to reward the weary travelers with a gift of serenity. The caravan entered the oasis with care, allowing the camels to drink first. Their long necks bent gracefully toward the water, ripples spreading out from their lips. Travelers followed, kneeling to wash their faces, filling their water skins, and letting the coolness soothe their hands. The air here was filled with the fragrance of damp soil and green leaves, a rare scent after days of sand and dust. They rested beneath the palms, where the shade was thick and welcoming. A breeze stirred the branches, and the leaves rustled with a gentle whisper, as if sharing secrets with those who listened closely. It was this sound that gave the place its name among travelers, the Oasis of Whispers. Some said the whispers were the voices of those who had come before, the countless merchants, wanderers, and pilgrims who had rested here through the centuries. Others believed the desert itself spoke in the movement of the leaves, reminding travelers that it both gave and took, offering life in one moment and challenge in the next. Whatever the truth, the sound soothed the caravan. Men, women, and children lay back on the soft ground, lulled into dreams by the rustling above. Food was shared freely. A woman opened a bundle of figs, passing them around. Another produced a jar of honey, thick and golden, to sweeten the bread they carried. Spices were sprinkled into boiling water over a small fire, releasing aromas of cardamom and cinnamon. The air filled with warmth and fragrance, turning a simple meal into something rich and memorable. Travelers spoke softly as they ate, telling stories of the road behind them and the lands ahead. An old man, his beard white as snow, leaned forward to share a tale. He spoke of a city far beyond the desert, a city where the walls gleamed like silver and markets overflowed with treasures from every corner of the world. He described musicians playing lutes and flutes in the streets, their melodies weaving through the air, while dancers in colorful silks moved like flowing water. The children listened with wide eyes, imagining the wonders that awaited. Even the adults, though they had heard such stories many times before, smiled quietly, their hearts warmed by the thought of what lay ahead. As the day passed, the travelers explored the oasis. Some climbed the palms to gather dates, while others waded into the shallow pools, their laughter mingling with the sound of water. A group of children collected smooth stones from the shore, treating them as precious treasures. Time seemed to slow, as if the oasis existed outside the desert's harsh rhythm. But as evening approached, the atmosphere shifted. The breeze grew cooler, and the whispers in the palms seemed louder, almost urgent. The leader of the caravan reminded everyone that no oasis could hold them forever. The road was long, and while rest was sweet, the journey awaited. Reluctantly, the travelers began to prepare for departure. Before leaving, many offered quiet thanks. Some dropped a pebble at the edge of the water, a simple gesture of gratitude. Others closed their eyes for a moment, listening to the whispers, as though seeking a blessing for the path ahead. The children clutched their small treasures, their faces glowing in the soft evening light. As they left the oasis, the desert stretched before them once more, vast and endless. Yet something had changed. The whispers of the oasis lingered in their hearts, carrying with them a sense of peace and strength. The night sky opened above, stars blooming like silver flowers in the darkness. The caravan moved forward, their footsteps steady, their spirits lifted by the memory of water, shade, and whispered blessings. The desert was vast, but so too was their determination. And somewhere beyond the horizon, new oases, new cities, and new stories awaited. The road of silk, spice, and dreams continued, quiet, endless, and full of serenity. The desert was quiet, almost breathless, as the caravan moved under the veil of night. The day's heat had finally loosened its grip, and the air carried a coolness that brushed gently against the skin. Above them, the sky unfolded like an endless tapestry, embroidered with countless stars. Each one shimmered with a brilliance that seemed sharper, clearer than anywhere else in the world. The travelers walked slowly, their camels swaying with a rhythm that matched the silence of the dunes. The sound of bells tied to their harnesses rang softly, blending with the crunch of sand beneath hooves and footsteps. A child looked up, eyes wide, and whispered, "It feels as though the stars are walking with us." The others nodded, for it was true, under the desert's vast dome, the heavens seemed to travel alongside them. The leader of the caravan carried an astrolabe, its polished brass surface catching the starlight. He would pause every so often, lifting it against the sky, measuring angles, reading constellations, and marking their direction. The desert had no roads, no signs, only the stars to guide them. And so, every night, the caravan placed its trust in these celestial companions. Among the stars, one shone more brightly than the rest. The travelers called it the guiding flame. It always seemed to hold its place, steady and unwavering, as though it alone knew the secret path through the shifting sands. Children pointed to it with delight, and even the elders took comfort in its glow. As they walked, stories began to weave their way through the caravan. An old woman, her voice soft as the desert wind, spoke of how the stars were once lanterns hung by the gods, lighting the way for mortals who wandered too far. A young man added that some stars were not lights at all, but souls of great travelers who had journeyed across mountains and deserts, and now watched over those who followed. The children listened with rapt attention, their heads tilted upward, their imaginations painting the night sky with tales of heroes and wanderers. The stars were no longer distant, they became friends, guardians, and storytellers. As midnight approached, the caravan paused. Fires were not lit, for flames could draw unwanted attention in the vast emptiness, but travelers wrapped themselves in blankets and sat in quiet circles. The desert air was filled with a stillness so deep that even whispers seemed too loud. Instead, many chose silence, gazing upward, letting the vastness of the sky fill their hearts. A young girl lay on her back, her eyes fixed on a trail of stars that stretched across the heavens like a river of light. "It looks like a road," she said softly. The leader smiled, his face illuminated by the starlight. "It is a road," he replied. "The road of the sky. Long before we carried silk and spices, the stars carried our ancestors' dreams. They walked beneath this same path, and so will those who come after us." The girl closed her eyes, holding the thought close, imagining travelers from centuries past walking beneath the same river of stars. Not far away, a musician plucked gently at the strings of a lute. The sound was tender, almost fragile, but in the stillness of the desert, every note seemed to linger forever. The melody wound itself into the air, mingling with the hush of the dunes. Some began to hum along, their voices low, until the caravan seemed to be wrapped in a lullaby woven of starlight and song. Sleep came easily beneath such a sky. Travelers rested with their heads against soft bundles, their dreams guided by constellations above. Some dreamed of faraway cities with shining gates, others of green valleys and rushing rivers. But all awoke with the same memory, the quiet comfort of the stars watching over them. When dawn finally came, it was slow and gentle. The stars dimmed, fading one by one, as though bowing gracefully to the light of the rising sun. The horizon blushed with pink, then deepened to gold, and the caravan stirred once again. Though the stars had vanished from sight, their presence lingered in the hearts of the travelers. Before setting off, the leader stood for a moment, his eyes fixed on the last star fading in the west. He whispered a silent word of thanks, a promise to return beneath their watchful glow when the sun gave way to night once more. The camels rose, their long shadows stretching across the dunes, and the caravan continued forward, guided now by the sun, but with the memory of stars still lighting their path within. The desert was vast, and the road long, yet each traveler carried with them the quiet knowledge that they were never truly alone. For whether by day or by night, earth or sky, there were always companions to guide, to protect, and to inspire. And so, with hearts full of serenity and eyes lifted toward unseen constellations, the caravan walked onward, always onward. Across the shifting sands of the Silk Road. The caravan descended into a valley where the desert seemed to open its arms, welcoming them into a space alive with movement and sound. At first, the travelers saw only the flicker of banners rising above clay walls, but as they drew nearer, the faint hum of voices carried on the wind. The hum grew louder until it unfolded into a chorus, 1,000 conversations, layered together, rising and falling like waves. They had arrived at a market. The Silk Road was not only a path through deserts and mountains, it was also a chain of gathering places, where people from every corner of the world paused, exchanged, and connected. Here, amid the dust and sun, a bustling marketplace blossomed like an oasis of human life. The first thing one noticed was the colors. Stalls draped in crimson silks, indigo cloths, and shimmering gold threads lined the pathways. Jars of spices glowed like treasures, saffron the color of dawn, pepper as black as midnight, turmeric as golden as the desert sun. Fruits from faraway lands spilled from baskets, pomegranates with ruby seeds, figs bursting with sweetness, dates glistening like amber. The air itself was transformed by these riches. Scents swirled together in the breeze, sharp cardamom, warm cinnamon, the smoky undertone of incense burning from bronze vessels. Every breath was a journey in itself, carrying the traveler from India to Persia, from Arabia to China, without ever leaving the market's walls. Voices rang through the streets, a tapestry of sound woven from many tongues. Persian merchants spoke with musical cadence, while traders from China conversed in tones as fluid as running water. Arab scholars debated in rich, rolling speech, their words full of rhythm and certainty. And in between, laughter and bargaining filled the air, for no market was complete without the art of negotiation. A young boy from the caravan clung to his mother's hand, his eyes wide as he tried to make sense of the sounds. "How do they understand one another?" he whispered. His mother smiled gently, pointing to the hands of the traders. "Watch closely," she said. And indeed, as they stood observing, they saw that language was not only made of words. Fingers pointed, gestures mimed, numbers written in the dust, and soon meaning was found even among strangers. The boy laughed softly, realizing that trade itself was a universal language. Near the center of the market stood a storyteller. His clothes were simple, but his voice was like silk, smooth, flowing, catching the attention of all who passed. Children gathered at his feet while adults lingered in the shade nearby. His tale spoke of a great phoenix that flew across the world, carrying seeds of knowledge in its feathers. Wherever the bird rested, wisdom bloomed, and it was said the bird's shadow still passed along the Silk Road, blessing those who listened to the stories. The children listened with mouths open, eyes wide. One little girl whispered to another, "Perhaps the phoenix is above us now." The storyteller heard and smiled knowingly, letting the paws stretch as if to give the bird a chance to pass overhead. Beyond the circle of stories, music spilled into the streets. A group of travelers sat cross-legged, plucking strings, beating small hand drums, and letting flutes sing through the air. The rhythm was foreign to some ears, yet strangely comforting, for music, too, was a language beyond borders. People swayed as they walked, and some paused to clap along, carried by the joy of the moment. Not all exchanges were of goods or songs. At one corner of the market, two scholars bent over parchment, their voices low but eager. One was from the east, the other from the west, yet both pointed to the same symbols, lines of mathematics, sketches of stars, the curve of a human form. Ideas flowed between them like water across a stream, refreshing both sides. It was in places like this that knowledge traveled as surely as silk and spices, carried onward by the caravans who listened and learned. The leader of the caravan walked slowly through the market, his eyes scanning not just the goods, but the faces of the people. He knew that each encounter here held more than trade. A single meeting could change the direction of a life. A single word, a single gesture of kindness, could ripple across the deserts and mountains, carried onward by those who journeyed. He stopped before a stall of glassware, delicate pieces that shimmered in the light. The merchant, noticing his interest, lifted a goblet toward the sun. It glowed with hues of blue and green, colors shifting like water. "This glass," the merchant said in halting words, "is made from fire and sand, yet it holds the beauty of rivers and skies." The leader nodded, moved not only by the object but by the poetry of the explanation. Nearby, children from the caravan tugged at their parents' sleeves, begging for small treasures, tiny clay animals, beads carved from bone, toys spun from wood. The market, in all its noise and wonder, was a place of dreams for them, just as much as it was a place of trade for adults. As evening approached, lanterns were lit, each one glowing softly, turning the market into a sea of stars upon the earth. The voices softened but did not fade, the bargaining continued but at a gentler pace, and music still threaded through the night air. The caravan gathered their supplies, sacks of rice, bundles of cloth, jars of spices, and prepared for the road ahead. Yet no one left unchanged. For in the market of many tongues, each traveler had tasted a piece of the world, had heard the laughter of strangers, had shared a breath scented with cinnamon and rosewater. When they finally stepped back into the open desert, the market faded behind them, its lanterns becoming distant sparks. The boy who had wondered about the languages turned his head one last time, whispering, it felt like the whole world lived there. His mother nodded, her eyes lingering on the lights. "Yes," she said softly. "And in a way, it does." The desert awaited them once more, silent and vast, but the memory of the market lingered, voices and colors carried in the heart, a reminder that along the Silk Road, every step was more than a journey through land. It was a journey through the souls of countless people, bound together by trade, story, and the quiet understanding that all were travelers beneath the same sky. The desert night gave way to the cool embrace of morning, and the caravan stirred once more, shaking off the dust of sleep and gathering itself for the long road ahead. There was always a rhythm to these journeys, a pattern woven into the very fabric of the Silk Road. At dawn, the bells of the camels rang softly, their tones like wind chimes caught in the gentle breeze. Merchants, travelers, and storytellers all moved with unspoken understanding, forming a living river of footsteps and hooves that flowed steadily eastward. This morning felt different. Perhaps it was the way the light fell over the horizon, painting the dunes in soft shades of gold and rose. Or perhaps it was the sense of anticipation that pulsed quietly among the travelers. For today, the caravan was not only a group of merchants on a path of trade, it was a gathering of dreams, stories, and whispered hopes. Every person carried something precious. Not just silks and spices, but fragments of their heart, their memories, their wishes for tomorrow. An old poet shuffled along near the front of the caravan. His beard was as white as desert salt, and his eyes glimmered with the light of 1,000 remembered journeys. Children liked to walk beside him, for he always had a tale ready to share. He spoke of golden palaces where emperors wore robes of cloud-like silk. He spoke of mountains that kissed the very sky, their peaks forever crowned in silver snow. And he spoke of a road so long and wide that it seemed to tie the world together like a great woven carpet. The children listened with open mouths, their imaginations painting pictures brighter than the sun. To them, the Silk Road was not only dust and heat and trade, it was a storybook without end. Each step was a turning page, each encounter a new illustration drawn across their minds. The caravan became more than a means of travel. It was a vessel of wonder, sailing through seas of sand and valleys of stone. Further behind, musicians carried their instruments wrapped carefully in cloth. One had a lute carved of dark wood, its strings humming with potential melody. Another held a flute of bone, smooth and pale as ivory. In the evenings, when fires burned low and stars brightened overhead, they would play together, and the desert would echo with soft music that lulled both man and beast to rest. The songs seemed to blend with the winds, carrying across dunes and beyond horizons, as though serenading the night itself. Among the caravan walked a painter, his robes patched with many colors of dust and dye. He carried brushes bound in cloth, and within a chest he kept pigments ground from earth and stone. His dream was not wealth but memory. He longed to capture the visions of the Silk Road, to paint the mountains, the oases, the faces of people who passed like fleeting shadows. For him, each stop was a canvas waiting to be filled. He told those who asked that someday he would hang his work in the courts of kings, where emperors and nobles could see the wide world through his eyes. Travelers carried more than goods, they carried secret wishes. One woman whispered prayers each night for her children left in a distant village. A young man hoped to earn enough through trade to buy land and build a home. Even the weary camels bore their quiet burdens, loyal companions who carried not only cargo but the dreams tied in each bundle. The Silk Road, in its winding, endless way, was a path of longing, a place where hearts yearned toward both memory and possibility. The air grew warmer as the sun rose higher, but there was still freshness in the wind. Ahead lay a valley shaded by cliffs, a place where the caravan would rest at midday. Travelers walked in groups, sharing stories, laughter, and gentle silence. A boy offered dried dates to his companions. A woman poured cool water from a goatskin flask. These small kindnesses became threads that bound the caravan together, weaving strangers into something like family. At the midday rest, carpets were spread beneath the shade of rock. The poet recited verses while the musicians strummed and played. A soft breeze carried the notes upward, where they mingled with the soaring cries of distant birds. Children clapped their hands, smiling, while elders closed their eyes, letting memory and music wash over them like a tide. And there, beneath the warmth of the sun and the hush of the shade, the caravan became a dream made real. It was no longer just a line of traders walking across the earth. It was a living story, a tapestry of many colors, woven by footsteps, voices, and hearts. As afternoon passed and the caravan resumed its journey, the rhythm returned, bells chiming, camels swaying, footsteps steady as the beating of a drum. Yet within that rhythm lay something deeper, something unspoken but shared. It was the recognition that every person, no matter how small their part, belonged to this great road. Each story, each dream, was a thread woven into the endless cloth of the Silk Road. By evening, the desert sky glowed with fading fire. The caravan set camp once more, fires flickering in a circle of light against the darkening sands. Musicians lifted their instruments again, filling the night with lullabies of strings and flutes. The poet's voice rose soft and steady, telling tales of travelers long gone, reminding everyone that they walked in the footsteps of countless souls before them. As stars scattered across the heavens, a hush fell upon the camp. Merchants, storytellers, children, and wanderers all listened to the music of night, the crackle of fire, the hum of wind, the distant echo of the earth itself. And in that moment, the Silk Road was more than a place. It was a dream. A dream that belonged to all who traveled it, carried not only in their journeys but in their hearts. The caravan of dreams drifted slowly into slumber, and with it, the road itself seemed to sleep, waiting for the dawn of another day. The caravan awoke before the first hint of daylight, when the stars still shimmered in the crisp air and the moon clung stubbornly to the black sky. This was no ordinary morning. Today, they would begin their climb into the mountains. The desert behind them had been vast, golden, and endless, but now, before them, loomed the towering silhouette of a range that seemed to pierce the heavens themselves. It was a place both feared and revered, a place where the Silk Road threaded its way through narrow passes, treacherous cliffs, and hidden valleys. The animals were restless, sensing the challenge ahead. The camels groaned and shifted, while the horses tossed their manes and stamped their hooves against the cold earth. The traders wrapped their cloaks tighter, pulling wool and fur around their shoulders to fight off the chill. They had grown accustomed to the dry heat of the sands, but now the wind carried a different bite, sharp, thin, and filled with the scent of snow. As the first light touched the peaks, turning them a pale shade of rose, the caravan began its slow, steady ascent. The path wound like a ribbon carved into the rock, narrow and unforgiving. On one side, the stone wall rose steeply upward, on the other, it plunged into dizzying depths where rivers raged far below. Every step of the journey demanded caution. The animals had to be guided carefully, their hooves searching for firm ground on the rough, uneven trail. The mountains were alive with silence. Not the warm, gentle silence of the desert night, but a vast, echoing quiet that magnified every sound, the scrape of hooves on stone, the soft clink of bells tied to camels, the muted voices of men who spoke in whispers, as though raising their voices too high might disturb the ancient slumber of the peaks. Above them, falcons circled, their cries sharp and fleeting. Occasionally, the travelers caught sight of mountain goats, sure-footed and fearless as they bounded across ridges that no human dared tread. By midday, the sun stood bright overhead, but its warmth was feeble here. The higher they climbed, the colder the air became. Thin clouds drifted across the peaks, wrapping them in veils of mist. Breath rose from every mouth in pale plumes, dissolving into the stillness. The caravan pressed on, step by careful step, while the sound of wind grew stronger, whistling through gaps in the stone, carrying with it the faint echo of distant avalanches. At times, the path opened into small ledges where the group could pause, letting the animals rest while they gazed at the view below. The desert stretched away into the horizon, now a golden sea far behind them. The sight was humbling, a reminder of how far they had come, and how much still lay ahead. Traders spoke quietly of the riches waiting beyond these mountains. Silk from China, glassware from Rome, spices from India. Each man carried not only his goods but also his hopes, his dreams, and the promises he had made to his family. As the day waned, shadows lengthened and the peaks took on a deep violet hue. The caravan sought shelter in a hollow, a small basin where the wind was less fierce. Fires were lit, their flames dancing weakly against the chill. The scent of roasted grains and dried meat filled the air, mingling with the sharp tang of smoke. Men huddled close, sharing warmth, while the animals knelt and settled, grateful for rest. That night, the sky above was unlike anything seen in the desert. Here, so close to the heavens, the stars seemed brighter, sharper, as though one could reach out and pluck them from the sky. The Milky Way stretched across the darkness like a river of light, guiding the travelers onward. Around the fire, stories were told, legends of those who had braved the mountains before them, and of those who had vanished into its depths, their names remembered only in whispers. One elder spoke of a great caravan centuries past, swallowed by a snowstorm that lasted 7 days. Another recounted the tale of a wandering monk who crossed the mountains barefoot, carrying nothing but his prayer beads, guided by faith alone. These stories were not meant to frighten but to remind each soul that the Silk Road was more than a path of trade. It was a path of endurance, of spirit, and of trust in the strength of both man and beast. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, the caravan drifted into sleep. Some rested soundly, while others awoke often, disturbed by the groans of shifting stone or the sudden crack of ice in the distance. Yet, despite the unease, there was a strange serenity here. The mountains, stern and unyielding, wrapped the travelers in a kind of protective embrace, allowing them to rest before the journey continued. When morning came, frost glittered on every surface, turning the camp into a field of diamonds. The breath of animals rose in clouds, and the men stamped their feet to shake off the numbness. Ahead lay more climbing, more narrow passes, and the uncertainty of weather that could change in a heartbeat. But the caravan rose with determination. Step by step, they would conquer the heights. For beyond the mountain pass lay new lands, new faces, and the promise of treasures. The Silk Road demanded courage, and those who dared to travel it found themselves changed, not only in fortune but in spirit. As they began their climb once more, each man knew he was part of something greater than himself. And so, with the sun rising to gild the snowy peaks in gold, the caravan pressed onward, carrying with them the quiet strength of the mountains, and the serenity that comes from walking a path both perilous and profound. The mountains slowly gave way to valleys, where the sharp cliffs softened into rolling slopes and green patches of earth began to appear once more. After days of climbing and winding through stone paths, the caravan finally descended into a wide basin where a river cut through the land like a silver ribbon. Its waters glittered in the morning sun, rushing swiftly, tumbling over rocks, and spreading out into pools where fish darted beneath the surface. The travelers paused on the ridge above the river, gazing down at its restless flow. The sound of the water filled the air, a constant murmur that drowned out all else, the chirping of birds, the distant cries of animals, even the whisper of wind through the grass. It was both soothing and intimidating. The river promised life, offering cool water to drink and green land for the animals to graze, yet it also posed a challenge: how to cross its rushing current without losing goods, animals, or lives. The caravan leader, an older man with a long white beard and eyes sharpened by years of travel, studied the waters carefully. He pointed toward a bend where the current slowed, where the river fanned out into shallows. It was not without danger, but it was the best chance they had. The animals were led down carefully. Camels groaned nervously, their long legs uncertain on the damp earth. Horses pawed at the ground, ears flicking back, sensing the tension of their handlers. The men whispered to one another, adjusting the load strapped to their beasts, tying knots tighter, wrapping silks and spices in protective cloth so they would not be ruined by water. At the riverbank, the sound was louder, urgent, like a voice that demanded respect. The water was icy cold when touched, carrying with it the bite of melting snow from the peaks above. The caravan leader tested the depth with a staff, planting it into the riverbed and watching how the current tugged at it. He nodded, signaling the crossing would begin. The first camel was urged forward. Its great padded feet splashed into the shallows, sending ripples across the surface. The animal groaned but stepped forward steadily, guided by the pull of its handler. Behind it, others followed, one after another, until a line of beasts stretched from bank to bank. The men walked alongside them, some holding ropes, others balancing loads, their boots sinking into the wet sand. The current tugged fiercely at legs and hooves. Water splashed up, soaking garments and darkening cloth. Now and then, a stone slipped underfoot, and someone stumbled, arms flailing, before regaining balance. Hearts beat fast, but the caravan pressed forward, urged on by determination and the steady shouts of their leader. Halfway across, the current grew stronger, swirling in hidden eddies that threatened to drag down whatever dared linger too long. One young man lost his footing and cried out as the river seized him. Without hesitation, another trader grabbed his arm, pulling with all his strength until the youth staggered back to his feet, gasping, dripping, but alive. The caravan cheered softly at the rescue, their voices carrying over the roar of the water. At last, the first animals reached the opposite bank, climbing up with awkward, heavy steps, shaking water from their coats. The rest followed, urged on by their handlers, until the final man stepped out of the river, his clothes clinging to him, his face pale but relieved. The crossing had been dangerous, but no lives had been lost, no goods swept away. The caravan rested on the grassy bank, spreading out blankets and hanging silks to dry in the sun. The animals grazed eagerly, grateful for the fresh shoots of grass after the barren slopes of the mountain. The traders washed their faces, cupping cool water in their hands, letting the river cleanse the dust and weariness from their skin. As they rested, stories began to flow as easily as the river beside them. One man spoke of a time when a flood had swallowed an entire caravan, carrying men and animals downstream for miles before casting their remains upon the rocks. Another told of sacred rivers in distant lands, where waters were said to wash away sins, leaving travelers pure and renewed. The men listened, their voices soft, their eyes fixed on the glittering current. When night fell, the caravan built a fire near the riverbank. Flames danced, their light reflecting on the water's restless surface. The sound of the current became a lullaby, steady and constant, wrapping the camp in its endless song. Some men sat quietly, staring into the fire, lost in thought. Others murmured prayers of thanks for their safe passage. Above, the stars appeared one by one, mirrored faintly in the river below. It seemed as though the heavens themselves had been duplicated upon the earth, a sky above and a sky beneath, with the caravan resting between the two. The sight filled them with wonder, with a calm sense of belonging, as though the world itself cradled them in gentle hands. In the stillness of the night, a flute began to play, a soft, wandering tune carried by one of the younger men. Its notes mingled with the murmur of the water, weaving a harmony that lulled even the most restless into peace. The music spoke of journeys past and journeys yet to come, of dangers faced and dreams carried onward. The caravan slept deeply that night, wrapped in the comfort of the river's song. And when dawn returned, with mist rising gently from the water, they rose renewed. The river, once an obstacle, had given them not only safe passage but also a gift of serenity, a reminder of resilience and unity. With their goods repacked and their animals rested, the caravan prepared to move on. Ahead lay more valleys, more villages, and more challenges. But as they set out once more, each traveler carried within him the memory of the river, the sound of its rushing water, the shimmer of starlight upon its surface, and the unshakable knowledge that together, they could cross even the wildest currents. And so the caravan pressed forward, leaving behind the silver ribbon that wound through the valley, carrying with them its serenity into the endless road ahead. The caravan had crossed the rivers and followed winding trails that led into the heart of the open steppe. Here, the air was wide and endless, and the horizon seemed to stretch forever in every direction. The land was vast, dressed in grasses that swayed like the surface of a gentle sea, and the wind carried with it the smell of earth and the faint scent of wildflowers. It was a place of freedom, where the sky was a dome so immense it made travelers feel small, yet comforted, as if wrapped in the embrace of eternity. As night began to fall, a glow appeared in the distance. Fires flickered, and soon, the travelers saw the nomads who had set up their camps upon the steppe. Low tents, shaped like circles, dotted the land like stars upon the ground. The hum of life could be felt before it was heard, children laughing, animals lowing, and voices singing softly into the wind. The caravan was welcomed with warm gestures. Hospitality was sacred upon the road, and the nomadic families understood well the bonds that held travelers together. The merchants and their companions were guided toward the campfires, where warm bowls of broth and fresh bread were offered. They were seated on carpets laid out upon the earth, richly patterned with symbols of sun, moon, and stars. When the meal was finished, silence spread. The fire was fed with wood, and sparks rose into the night, mingling with the constellations above. Then came the sound of a stringed instrument, soft at first, then steady, echoing across the plain. A nomad elder held the instrument with practiced ease, his hands plucking and strumming with gentle rhythm. The melody was like the steppe itself, endless, flowing, and deep. Soon, a woman's voice joined, clear and calm, singing words that seemed woven with the very wind. She sang of the horses that roamed the plains, of the rivers that gave life, of the stars that guided journeys through night. The song spoke of ancestors, of journeys taken long before, of caravans that had crossed mountains and deserts, carrying with them the hope of distant lands. The caravan travelers listened, their bodies stilled by the magic of the song. Some closed their eyes, letting the music drift over them like a soft blanket. Others gazed at the fire, watching as the flames seemed to dance in rhythm with the voice. The merchants felt a sense of serenity, as if they had become part of the endless chain of those who had listened to such songs across centuries, along the same road. Children of the nomads began to dance around the fire, their steps light, their laughter mingling with the music. The firelight caught their faces, their joy unrestrained, a reminder of innocence preserved even in the harshness of the open steppe. The rhythm of drums joined the melody now, their deep thrum echoing like the heartbeat of the earth itself. One of the merchants, moved by the music, shared his own story with the nomads. He spoke of his home in a far-off city, of the market stalls crowded with spices, of lanterns glowing above busy streets. The nomads listened, their eyes bright with curiosity. And in return, they told stories of their migrations, of following the herds across seasons, of facing storms and winters, of finding peace in the endless horizon. The night deepened, yet no one wished to leave. The songs grew softer, becoming whispers carried by the wind. The elder played a lullaby on his instrument, its notes slow and calming. Mothers cradled their children close, rocking them gently as the fire's glow softened into embers. A stillness fell, yet it was not empty. It was the kind of stillness filled with presence, with the sense that every soul, traveler and nomad alike, had been woven together by the night's song. The caravan travelers felt that they had been welcomed into a family, even if only for a single night upon the steppe. As the fires burned low, the travelers lay upon their mats beneath the dome of stars. The grass whispered with the wind, and the songs of the nomads lingered in their minds. Sleep came easily, not as a weight, but as a gift. It carried them into dreams where the melodies of the steppe continued, soft and unending, like the road itself. And so, beneath the vast sky, cradled by earth and song, the caravan found serenity once more. The songs of the nomads had become part of their journey, part of the story of the Silk Road, echoing in their hearts as they dreamed of the days to come. The journey along the open steppe slowly gave way to signs of civilization. The travelers of the caravan began to notice the land shifting. The grasses grew shorter, the earth more worn from the tread of countless feet, hooves, and wheels. Along the horizon, faint silhouettes rose, towers and walls, their edges softened by distance and haze. It was the sign of a city, one of the great resting places along the Silk Road, where markets flourished and lives intertwined. The sight stirred something within the weary merchants. For days they had known only the expanse of wind and sky, where horizons seemed endless. Now, the presence of stone and structure reminded them of human hands, of permanence carved against the wildness of the world. Step by step, the city drew closer, and with each mile, the murmur of voices, the cries of animals, and the clamor of trade began to hum faintly in the air. By the time the caravan reached the great city gates, the sun had begun its descent, painting the walls in hues of gold and amber. The gates themselves were immense, carved of heavy wood reinforced with iron, towering high above the road. Upon their surfaces, intricate designs had been etched, symbols of protection, images of lions and dragons, emblems of power and welcome alike. Guards stood on either side, their posture proud, yet their faces calm, as if accustomed to the endless procession of travelers who sought shelter within. The caravan halted, and the leader stepped forward. Papers were exchanged, seals inspected, and though the ritual took time, it was performed with respect. Cities thrived on trade, and the merchants who brought goods across deserts and steppes were honored, for they carried with them the lifeblood of commerce and culture. Once permission was granted, the gates began to creak open, their wooden beams moving slowly, as though waking from slumber. Beyond lay the heart of the city. The travelers entered through the archway, passing into streets alive with sound and color. Lanterns had already been lit, their glow spilling across stone pathways. Stalls lined the roads, each overflowing with goods, spices in neat pyramids, silks that shimmered in the firelight, and jars of oils and perfumes whose scents carried on the breeze. Merchants called out in a dozen languages, their voices a chorus that mingled with the bleating of goats, the ringing of bells, and the laughter of children darting through the crowds. The caravan moved slowly, their animals and wagons drawing stares from locals. Children ran beside them, pointing with delight at camels burdened with goods from distant lands. Women in flowing robes glanced curiously at fabrics they had never seen before, while older men stroked their beards thoughtfully, already calculating the worth of the wares carried within. At the city square, the caravan was granted a space to rest. There, a fountain bubbled, its cool waters glistening in the torchlight. Pigeons gathered at its edges, fluttering into the air when startled by laughter or song. Around the square stood inns and tea houses, their doors open, spilling warmth and music into the evening. The travelers unburdened their camels, stretching their tired limbs as relief washed over them. Some immediately made their way to the inns, where food and drink awaited. Others wandered the streets, unable to resist the pull of the markets that beckoned from every corner. One merchant found himself drawn toward a silk stall, where rolls of fabric lay in cascades of crimson, sapphire, and emerald. He ran his hand gently across their surface, marveling at the softness, at the sheen that seemed to catch every flicker of flame. The stall-keeper, smiling with pride, spoke of how these silks had been dyed using rare plants, how each color carried meaning. Red for good fortune, blue for peace, green for prosperity. Another traveler followed his nose toward a spice stall, where baskets overflowed with saffron, cinnamon, pepper, and cloves. The air itself was rich, as though every breath was a sip of warmth. The stall-keeper offered samples, pinches of spice pressed into palms, each grain holding a story of distant lands. The merchant closed his eyes as he inhaled, the fragrance lifting his spirit, reminding him of why the journey was worth every hardship. At the tea house by the square, the leader of the caravan sat cross-legged upon a low cushion, a steaming cup placed before him. The tea was fragrant, brewed with herbs grown in the nearby hills. Its steam curled upward like a ribbon, carrying notes of mint and honey. Around him, voices blended in conversation, some speaking of trade, others of journeys, still others of family. It was a place where walls fell away, where strangers became friends, and where the great road revealed itself not only in distance traveled but in the connections made. As night deepened, the city gates were closed behind them, sealed until morning. The travelers knew they were safe, cradled within the walls, protected by the strength of the city. Yet they also knew that these walls did not confine, instead, they sheltered, offering a pause in the journey, a place to breathe before the road called again. Later, when the market stalls grew quiet and the lanterns flickered lower, the caravan members returned to their resting place near the fountain. The sound of water lulled them, mingling with the distant strum of instruments drifting from an inn. The square, once alive with voices, had softened into calm, its stones cool beneath the night air. Lying upon mats spread out beneath the stars, the travelers reflected on their passage through the gates. They thought of the walls that had greeted them, the symbols carved into their surface, and the strength they represented. The city was more than stone and timber, it was a reminder that even in the vastness of the road, there were havens of light and life waiting, where stories could be shared and peace could be found. Sleep came gently to them, like the closing of the gates, slow and sure. In their dreams, they walked once more beneath archways, through lantern-lit streets, past the stalls of spice and silk, their hearts comforted by the memory of welcome. And so, the caravan rested within the great city, held in serenity, ready for the road that awaited beyond its gates. The caravan moved quietly into the evening, the horizon brushed with strokes of rose and indigo. Night had begun its descent, and with it came a new kind of wonder. For on the distant road ahead, faint glimmers appeared, tiny sparks dancing against the darkness, like stars fallen to earth. These were lanterns, strung along the pathways of an eastern city, guiding travelers into a world of color, warmth, and light. The Silk Road, so often marked by sand and silence, now opened to the brilliance of human hands and imagination. The lanterns swayed in the wind, their frames crafted of bamboo and silk, their colors glowing red, gold, and jade. Each one carried not only flame but also a story, wishes of families, blessings for merchants, prayers for safe passage. The air was cool, yet the lanterns gave the sense of warmth, a promise of welcome after the long journey through the deserts and mountains. As the caravan approached the gates of the city, the light grew brighter, forming rivers of brilliance overhead. Lanterns were tied to strings that arched from one rooftop to another, while some floated gently on the waters of the canal that wound like a ribbon through the heart of the city. Their reflections shimmered on the surface, creating the illusion that the stars themselves had come down to swim. The merchants slowed their camels and horses, awestruck by the sight. Many of them had traveled far, seeing the wonders of Samarkand, Kashgar, and Merv, but this Eastern celebration was unlike anything else. Children laughed and ran along the lantern-lit streets, holding tiny paper lamps shaped like lotuses and fish. The fragrance of roasted chestnuts, tea, and sweet cakes drifted on the air. It was a moment where exhaustion slipped away, replaced by quiet joy. Our narrator's voice follows with softness, reminding us that such festivals were not merely displays of beauty but also acts of unity. Along the Silk Road, where so many cultures crossed, lanterns became a universal language. A red lantern in the east might symbolize prosperity, while an oil lamp in the west might stand for guidance. Together, they illuminated the truth that light, in all its forms, was a shared comfort, a bridge between strangers. The caravan passed through the gate, the sound of bells marking their arrival. The city opened like a dream, narrow alleys, lantern-lit shops, and stalls filled with silk shimmering in the glow. The merchants laid out their goods in the light of these flames, rolls of embroidered fabric, porcelain cups that caught the lantern glow like captured moons, and spices whose aromas seemed even richer under the watchful eyes of the lanterns above. As the night deepened, the streets filled with music. Strings plucked in delicate patterns, flutes carrying soft melodies, and drums that echoed like the heartbeat of the festival. Dancers moved with the lanterns, their silk robes fluttering like flames themselves. The lanterns swayed overhead, as if in rhythm to the music, painting the crowd below in shifting shades of crimson, amber, and jade. Travelers from across the world, Persians, Arabs, Indians, Mongols, and Chinese, stood side by side, marveling together. Each carried memories of their own homes, their own traditions, but here under the glow of the lanterns, they found a common serenity. Some joined hands in dances, others shared cups of tea or exchanged small gifts. The festival was more than celebration, it was a reminder of connection. As midnight drew near, the lanterns became more than decoration. The people of the city gathered by the river, carrying their paper lanterns shaped like flowers. One by one, they placed them on the water, whispering wishes into the night. Some wished for wealth, some for love, others for peace on the long roads ahead. The river became a current of glowing petals, each carrying its secret prayer downstream. The narrator pauses here, letting the listener imagine their own lantern drifting into the night. Perhaps a wish for rest, for calm, for safety, or for simple happiness. The soft sound of water and the glow of endless lanterns paint the mind with comfort, encouraging the heart to breathe slowly and deeply. When the lanterns floated out of sight, the people returned to the city streets, their voices hushed now, their laughter softened. The festival had given them joy, but also serenity, a gentle quiet after the music and color. Merchants returned to their inns, travelers to their tents, children to their beds. The lanterns continued to sway in the night air, guardians of dreams. In the silence of the later hours, the caravan rested as well. Camels lay down beside their loads, their shadows flickering against the lantern glow. Traders closed their eyes, soothed by the muffled sounds of the city. And though the Silk Road stretched endlessly onward, tonight they were wrapped in light, safe beneath 1,000 flames. The story of lanterns, like so many along the road, was one of hope. They lit not only the streets but also the weary hearts of those who traveled so far from home. And in their glow, the Silk Road felt less like a road of distance, and more like a bridge of unity, where light overcame darkness, and serenity guided every step. And so, the chapter drifts to its close, leaving us with the image of endless lanterns rising into the sky. Their glow mingles with the stars until the two become indistinguishable, reminding us that human wishes and the heavens above are forever linked. The journey continues, but tonight, the soul rests in the peace of gentle light. The caravan's footsteps slowed as dawn painted the horizon with gentle hues of gold and pale blue. After nights of travel and days filled with trade, the merchants were led to a place unlike the bustling markets or noisy streets they had known. Here, beyond the walls of the eastern city, there lay a quiet refuge, the Garden of Scholars. The garden was hidden behind carved gates, its entrance framed by stone lions that seemed to guard not wealth, but wisdom. When the gates opened, the travelers found themselves in a world of serenity. Winding pathways led beneath arching bamboo, their leaves whispering in the morning breeze. Clear ponds mirrored the sky, where koi fish swam lazily beneath lotus blossoms. Bridges of wood arched gracefully across the water, and pavilions of painted timber rose like resting birds amidst the greenery. This was not a garden for power or conquest, but for thought. It was a place where poets came to compose verses, where scholars traced the movements of the stars, and where weary travelers might find not only rest, but inspiration. The air carried the fragrance of plum blossoms and pine, scents that invited the mind to stillness. Our narrator's voice softens here, describing how the merchants walked in silence, their footsteps muffled by moss-covered stones. For once, the road did not demand haste. Instead, the garden seemed to whisper, slow down, breathe, reflect. The sound of trickling water from a bamboo fountain added rhythm to their steps, each drop falling like the steady beat of a calm heart. At the far end of the garden stood a pavilion known as the House of Quiet Study. Its pillars were carved with dragons curling upward, and inside, scrolls lined the shelves, holding centuries of wisdom. There were maps of the heavens, diagrams of the human body, poems about the seasons, and treatises on philosophy. The scholars who gathered here believed that knowledge was as valuable as silk or jade, and that to share it was to enrich the world. Merchants often spoke in coins and measures, but in this place, words became treasures. A Persian trader unrolled a scroll of poetry written in flowing calligraphy. A Chinese scholar responded with verses about the moon, their voices weaving a dialogue across cultures. An Indian traveler, his satchel filled with manuscripts, spoke of mathematics and the mysteries of zero, while a philosopher from the West discussed the balance of justice and law. The garden became more than a sanctuary, it was a crossroads of ideas, where thought traveled as freely as goods along the Silk Road. The narrator gently reminds us that the road was not only a path for silk and spices, but also for dreams, philosophies, and discoveries. Just as a spice could transform a meal, a single idea could transform a generation. Outside the pavilion, musicians played quietly by the ponds. Their melodies were not for entertainment alone, but for meditation. The soft plucking of strings seemed to ripple across the water, while the flute's voice drifted like the morning mist. Birds joined the music with their songs, and the garden itself seemed to breathe in harmony with every note. The merchants found themselves slowing their thoughts. For days, their minds had been filled with concerns, prices, bargains, and distances still to be crossed. But here, in the company of scholars, they felt the weight of those worries lift. A few wrote their own verses on slips of paper, tucking them into the branches of trees as offerings to the future. Others sat by the water, sketching the outlines of the garden as a memory to carry with them. As the day unfolded, discussions turned to the stars. The scholars brought out armillary spheres and scrolls that mapped constellations. They spoke of how sailors used the stars to guide their journeys, how farmers measured the seasons, and how emperors sought wisdom in the skies. A merchant who had once crossed the deserts of Persia shared his memory of seeing the Milky Way stretch across the heavens like a river of silver sand. Another recalled the constellations above India, where they were said to influence fate. In this moment, the garden became more than a meeting place, it was a mirror of the universe. Just as the ponds reflected the sky, the scholars' conversations reflected the endless curiosity of humanity. Each voice was like a lantern in the darkness, illuminating a corner of the unknown. As evening descended, lanterns were lit within the garden. They were simpler than those of the festival, small lamps of clay and oil, their flames steady and calm. The scholars read aloud by their light, their words mingling with the scent of incense that drifted through the air. Travelers listened, some lulled nearly to sleep by the rhythm of gentle voices, others stirred to wonder by the thoughts shared so freely. The narrator pauses here, inviting us to imagine ourselves in that pavilion, listening to the exchange of wisdom, feeling the cool air of night settle over the garden. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of a night bird, the glow of lanterns reflected in the ponds, all of it becomes a lullaby for the spirit. When the hour grew late, the scholars bowed to their guests, reminding them that the journey ahead would continue, but that the seeds planted in their minds tonight would travel farther than any caravan. The merchants left the garden slowly, their steps lightened, their hearts quieter. They carried no goods from this place, but something far more lasting, the memory of serenity, and the spark of wisdom shared under the painted roof of the house of quiet study. The caravan awoke once again at dawn, though this dawn was different. The air was no longer filled with the sharp dryness of the desert, nor the crisp bite of mountain wind. Instead, a soft mist clung to the earth, and the land before them was rolling and green. The Silk Road, ever-changing in its landscapes, had brought them now into a world of gentle hills, tea groves, and flowing rivers. This was the path known to many as the tea roads, where caravans carried not only silk, spices, and jade, but also the fragrant leaves that would one day become cups of warmth in distant lands. The air itself was alive with the scent of damp soil and tender leaves, as if the earth whispered with every breath. Birds sang from the trees above, filling the morning with gentle music. The mist clung low, veiling the caravan in silver until the sun slowly rose higher, burning it away with rays of golden light. The travelers, long accustomed to sand and stone, felt their spirits lifted by the sight of green hills that stretched endlessly into the horizon. As they walked, they saw neat terraces carved into the slopes, each one carefully tended by workers who moved gracefully among the rows of tea plants. Women in simple robes carried woven baskets, plucking the tender young leaves with delicate hands. Their movements were so practiced, so fluid, that it seemed like a dance, each gesture part of a rhythm passed down through generations. From the distance, the travelers could hear the soft hum of their voices, singing old songs as they worked. The caravan slowed, for the road passed directly through these tea groves. Children ran to greet the travelers, their laughter bubbling like water over stones. They offered small cups of freshly brewed tea, its steam curling into the air with a fragrance unlike anything the travelers had ever known. It was earthy yet floral, simple yet profound. A single sip carried the warmth of the land itself, as if the hills, the rain, and the hands that plucked the leaves had all gathered together in that small cup. The merchants of the caravan exchanged smiles. They knew that tea was no longer just a drink of the local villages, it was becoming a treasure, sought far across the world. From these misty hills, it would travel thousands of miles, carried in crates on camels and ships, until it reached courts and markets where rulers and scholars alike would sip and marvel at its subtle taste. The Silk Road was not merely a path for goods, it was a thread weaving together cultures, and tea was now one of its finest strands. That evening, the caravan was welcomed into a village nestled among the groves. The houses were made of wood, their roofs sloping gently to shed the rain. Lanterns glowed softly in the windows, casting warm circles of light into the night. The villagers invited the travelers to join in their evening meal. Together they sat on woven mats, sharing bowls of rice, vegetables, and, of course, steaming pots of tea that never seemed to empty. An elder of the village, his hair white and his eyes bright, spoke to the travelers of the spirit of tea. He told them that to drink tea was not merely to quench thirst, but to enter a moment of stillness, to taste the harmony of earth and sky. He described how each leaf carried the memory of rain, sun, and soil, and how, when steeped, those memories were released, offering peace to whoever sipped. The travelers listened in silence, cradling their cups, and felt that peace flowed gently into them. The night outside was quiet, the hills cloaked in mist, the stars faint above the drifting clouds. In the glow of lantern light, the travelers felt they had stepped into a place both simple and profound, where life was guided not by haste, but by rhythm, patience, and care. Here, on the tea roads, serenity was not just found at the end of a journey, it was discovered in every leaf, every breath, every moment of stillness. The caravan lingered for several days, resting and trading. They watched as the villagers sorted, dried, and rolled the leaves with careful hands. They learned that some teas were delicate, meant to be sipped in quiet contemplation, while others were strong, brewed to awaken and invigorate. Merchants from distant lands spoke of how kings and scholars in their homelands treasured tea as a rare gift, a symbol of refinement and wisdom. The travelers realized that they were witnessing the birth of a tradition that would echo for centuries. One morning, as the caravan prepared to move on, the villagers gathered to bid them farewell. They offered bundles of dried tea, wrapped carefully in cloth, as gifts for the journey. The leader of the caravan bowed deeply, promising that the taste of their hills would be carried across deserts, mountains, and seas, so that others too might feel the serenity of the tea roads. The mist rose once more as the caravan departed, rolling gently across the hills. Behind them, the voices of the villagers faded into the distance, replaced by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The road stretched on, but the memory of the tea, its taste, its fragrance, its stillness, remained with the travelers. And so, with calm hearts and quiet strength, they continued their journey, carrying with them not only goods for trade, but a deeper sense of peace. The Silk Road had given them many treasures, yet on these misty hills, they discovered one of its most serene gifts. The journey continued, winding eastward, as the caravan once more entered the open stretches of the Silk Road. After the green hills of tea and the quiet mist, the land began to change again. The hills softened into plains, the plains opened into dry steppes, and the travelers once more felt the weight of distance pressing upon them. Yet here, scattered like stars across the night, stood havens of safety and rest, the Caravanserais, great inns built to shelter weary travelers and their animals. Each caravanserai rose from the horizon like a fortress. Their walls were strong and high, built of stone or sun-baked brick, designed to withstand both the desert winds and the dangers of the road. As the caravan approached the first of these great inns, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The gates stood wide, welcoming, and above them an inscription carved in weathered stone invited all travelers to enter in peace. Inside, the world changed. The noise of the road fell away, replaced by the murmurs of voices, the smell of cooking fires, and the shuffle of camels and horses being led to water troughs. Travelers from many lands gathered within these walls, merchants with bales of silk, nomads with their herds, pilgrims on sacred journeys, and envoys bearing letters sealed with royal marks. Each carried their own story, and here, in the safety of the caravanserai, those stories mingled like the spices in a great pot of stew. The architecture itself inspired awe. The travelers entered a vast courtyard, open to the sky, where the stars would shine unhindered at night. Along the walls, arched chambers provided rooms for sleeping, for storing goods, and for prayer. There were kitchens, where the smell of bread baking drifted into the air, and stables where animals rested on soft straw. Lamps burned in niches, casting warm light that seemed to soften the stone itself. That evening, the caravan settled into their chambers. They spread out their mats, laid down their bundles, and breathed deeply the scent of security. For days on the road they had slept under shifting skies, always half alert for danger. But here, behind walls and gates, they could close their eyes without fear. Sleep came easily, as though carried on the very stones of the place. Yet before sleep, there was gathering. In the courtyard, fires were lit, and travelers circled together. Some roasted meats on skewers, while others shared dried fruits and bread. The merchants exchanged news, of distant markets, of wars and peace, of roads safe and roads perilous. A storyteller rose, his voice carrying across the courtyard. He told of ancient heroes, of journeys long before theirs, and of treasures hidden by time. Children listened wide-eyed, their heads resting on their parents' laps, while the older travelers nodded slowly, soothed by memory and tale. The leader of the caravan spoke quietly with other merchants, arranging trades and learning of the lands ahead. A group of scholars unrolled maps, tracing routes with their fingers, debating the paths of rivers and mountains. Musicians plucked strings and tapped small drums, their music weaving gently through the air until even the animals seemed calmed by the rhythm. For the weary, the Caravanserai was more than stone walls and food, it was a symbol of connection. Each inn was a thread, tying together distant lands. A merchant from Persia might rest beside a scholar from India, a pilgrim from Arabia might share bread with a silk weaver from China. Language barriers softened here, bridged by gestures, laughter, and the universal comfort of shared rest. As the night deepened, the fires burned lower. The lamps in the chambers flickered like stars trapped in stone. Above, the true stars shone freely, countless and eternal. A silence settled, not empty but full. Full of trust, of safety, of the knowledge that for one night, no danger could touch them. The walls of the Caravanserai embraced them all like a protective guardian, whispering, "Rest, for the road will wait until morning." When dawn came, the inn awoke slowly. The sound of animals stirring filled the courtyard, mixed with the crackle of new fires. Steam rose from kettles of tea and pots of porridge. Merchants packed their goods, children rubbed sleep from their eyes, and guards checked harnesses and ropes. The great gates opened, letting in the morning light, and once more the road stretched before them. As the caravan departed, one of the younger travelers looked back. The walls of the Caravanserai stood still and strong, a beacon against the endless land. She thought of the countless others who had passed through those same gates before her, and of those yet to come. Each traveler, though different in face and purpose, shared this same moment of pause, this same breath of safety. In that thought was a quiet comfort, one she carried with her long after the walls faded into the distance. And so, the Caravanserais became a rhythm in the journey. Days of long travel were punctuated by these havens, each one offering its own version of peace. Some stood near bustling markets, where traders gathered in great numbers, others were lonely outposts, their lamps burning like solitary stars in the wilderness. But all were bound by the same spirit, a promise of shelter, of community, of rest. The Silk Road was vast, and often perilous, but with every caravanserai, it became a little less lonely. The travelers carried not only their goods but also the memory of these stone sanctuaries, where human kindness and careful design had transformed hardship into something bearable. That night, as they camped beneath the open sky once more, the caravan lay awake for a while, thinking of the walls they had left behind. The wind was cool, the stars clear, and though there were no stone walls around them now, the memory of that safety still lingered. It was enough to ease their minds into sleep, carrying them softly into dreams. The journey along the Silk Road, so full of desert winds and bustling markets, now carried us into lands of quiet reverence. The path curved gently through valleys where mountains rose like ancient guardians, their peaks crowned in mist. Here, the air grew cooler, the sound of traders' chatter softened, and a new presence filled the road, the presence of temples, shrines, and places of devotion that had stood for centuries, quietly watching as caravans came and went. It was said that the Silk Road was more than a passage for silk and spices. It was a river of faith, carrying ideas, prayers, and philosophies across distant lands. As we walked, I began to notice carved stones by the roadside, figures of guardians, small shrines with incense still burning, and prayer flags fluttering gently in the wind. Some were simple, no more than a flat rock carved with symbols. Others were ornate, with gold leaf and painted walls that glowed even under cloudy skies. One evening, our caravan approached a hillside where the sound of a bell echoed through the valley. It was a soft tone, neither harsh nor urgent, but soothing, as though it called not to the ear but to the heart. A monastery stood there, its walls whitewashed, its roof beams painted in deep reds and blues. Lanterns glowed faintly along its outer wall, and the smell of incense drifted on the breeze. The monks welcomed us without question, offering warm tea in simple clay cups. Their voices were soft, measured, and full of calm. They lived without hurry, their days marked not by the rising price of silk or the gossip of merchants, but by prayer, meditation, and the gentle tolling of bells. I noticed how even the animals seemed quiet in their presence. The camels knelt more peacefully, the horses lowered their heads as though they, too, understood this was a place of stillness. The monks shared stories with us. They spoke of travelers from lands far to the east, who had come seeking wisdom, and of scholars from the west, who had carried scrolls of philosophy and medicine along this very path. The temple, they said, had stood here for centuries, its stones repaired countless times, its walls repainted, yet its heart never changed. That night, I lay on a woven mat inside one of the temple's guest rooms. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the wooden shutters, and the distant bell tolled at midnight. It was said the bell kept away restless spirits, but to me it sounded like a reminder of the world's vastness, a quiet voice saying, "Be still. Be present. This moment is enough." In the morning, before we set out again, the monks invited us to watch their sunrise ritual. The first rays of light fell across the mountains, painting them in soft gold, while the monks chanted in deep, resonant tones. The sound seemed to echo off the stones, ripple through the valley, and settle gently into our hearts. As we continued along the Silk Road, temples appeared often. Some were small roadside shrines with candles flickering in the breeze. Others were great stone halls where murals told stories of gods, of saints, of heroes who walked between heaven and earth. Each had its own rhythm, its own voice, but together they formed a chorus of faith. I came to realize that these temples were not only places for the devout. They were waypoints of peace for all travelers, merchants, soldiers, scholars, wanderers alike. In a world where the road was long and uncertain, the temple bells offered comfort. Their sound traveled across valleys, reaching even those who did not stop, reminding them that there was serenity amidst the dust. One afternoon, we paused at a shrine built beside a waterfall. The water cascaded down in silver strands, its endless voice blending with the ringing of a single bronze bell hung from a wooden beam. The shrine itself was modest, a simple structure of wood and stone, yet it seemed more majestic than palaces. There, water and prayer became one, and for a while we simply sat, letting the sound wash over us, until the weight of the road lifted from our shoulders. Farther along, we passed through villages where children played around temple courtyards, chasing each other beneath hanging lanterns. Their laughter mingled with the steady rhythm of prayer drums, creating a harmony that felt both playful and eternal. Elders sat nearby, reciting verses, their voices soft but strong, keeping traditions alive as the world around them changed. At times, we encountered other travelers who had visited the temples before us. Some carried small charms tied to their belts, bells, beads, or scrolls blessed by monks. Others spoke of visions they had during meditation, moments of clarity or dreams that guided them onward. On the Silk Road, these stories traveled as swiftly as spices and silk, weaving a tapestry of shared belief. As night fell one evening, we stopped by a great temple perched on a cliffside. Torches burned along its walls, and the stars stretched endlessly above. From within came the deep hum of chanting, a sound so low and steady that it seemed to vibrate through the very earth beneath our feet. The monks welcomed us, and as we rested, I watched the sky through an open window. Stars glimmered like distant lamps, while the temple's great bell tolled again, its voice merging with the silence of the heavens. I realized, as sleep overtook me, that these temples were more than resting places. They were reminders that the road was not only about trade or travel, but about the spirit. Every step was both outward and inward, every bell a call to pause, to breathe, and to remember that serenity was not at the end of the road, but all along it. As the caravan wound its way deeper into the thriving heartlands of the Silk Road, the evening settled in with a warm hush, and the merchants found themselves gathered in the glow of firelight. The desert wind that had once been sharp was now soft, carrying with it a blend of fragrances that spoke of distant lands, cardamom, cinnamon, and dried petals of roses tucked carefully into sacks. Every merchant, every traveler, carried with them not just goods, but tales, for the Silk Road was not simply a passage for commerce, but a thread of voices, weaving together stories from the farthest corners of the world. The fire crackled gently, and shadows danced along the canvas of tents pitched close together. A young merchant with bright eyes, barely into his 20s, rose to his feet. In his hands he held a strip of shimmering fabric, silk the color of twilight, woven with patterns that caught the light like stars shimmering across the night sky. He told a story of how this fabric had been woven by women in a village far away in China, where mulberry trees lined the fields and silkworms spun their delicate threads in secret. He spoke with such reverence that the listeners could almost see the silkworms in their cocoons, their lives quietly giving birth to beauty that traveled thousands of miles. An older spice trader, his beard silver and long, responded with his own tale. He leaned forward, sprinkling a pinch of saffron into a cup of steaming tea. The liquid turned a brilliant gold, and the glow seemed to illuminate his face. He told of the mountains where saffron flowers bloomed, their purple petals delicate against the earth, and how entire families spent their mornings gathering the tiny threads, careful not to bruise their fragile beauty. He described how the value of a handful of saffron was greater than its weight in gold, and how emperors demanded it in their courts for feasts, for perfumes, and for sacred offerings. The circle grew quieter, all listening, for it was not the goods themselves that held the travelers captive, but the lives that lived within them, the fields, the farmers, the labor, the journeys, the dreams. A nomadic storyteller, who traveled without goods but with words alone, leaned back with a smile. His eyes sparkled in the firelight as he began to recite a story of cinnamon, once carried by ship from distant islands, its bark curling into fragrant scrolls. He spoke of sailors who risked their lives against stormy seas to bring it to faraway markets, and of kings who guarded it fiercely, spreading rumors of its origin to keep its source secret. His voice was low and soothing, weaving a rhythm that made even the youngest listeners rest their heads on their arms, lulled by the sound. In the background, the air was alive with fragrance. The sacks of spices resting against the caravan wheels seemed to whisper their own tales. Cloves, nutmeg, pepper, cardamom, all carried the voices of oceans and mountains. Even the tea leaves rustling in their cloth pouches seemed to carry the memory of gentle rains falling on high terraces where they grew. One woman, a weaver's daughter traveling with her father, pulled out a small piece of embroidery she had stitched during the journey. It showed in bright threads a caravan crossing dunes, with camels and banners swaying in the imagined breeze. She shared how each stitch was meant to hold not only color, but memory, so that long after the journey was over, someone could look upon the cloth and feel the warmth of the sand, the silence of the desert nights, the music of laughter shared by strangers who became family. The listeners admired her work, touched by the thought that even fabric could become a storybook. As the fire burned lower, the circle began to murmur with softer tones, voices weaving into one another like threads on a loom. a Persian trader recited a poem about silk that shimmered like rivers under the moonlight. A traveler from India sang a song about spices that danced in pots of stew and warmed entire villages with their scent. A young boy recited a riddle about peppercorns, making the group laugh softly. And all the while, the caravan guards stood just beyond the glow, their silhouettes tall and silent, watching the night for safety, their ears perhaps catching fragments of the tales. The stars above stretched endlessly, a dome of silver light. And within that dome, the travelers became more than merchants, they became keepers of memory, carrying with them not only goods but the essence of humanity's endless imagination. When silence finally settled, it was not heavy but comforting, like a blanket tucked gently around weary shoulders. The wind carried the scent of the spices deeper into the desert night, and the silk glowed faintly under the starlight, like threads spun from the heavens themselves. One by one, the travelers curled into their blankets, their minds filled not just with thoughts of trade, but with the dreams carried by silk and spice. And so, on that quiet night, beneath the eternal stars, the Silk Road once again proved itself to be more than a path for merchants. It was a bridge of stories, a place where goods and voices intertwined, ensuring that across thousands of miles and countless generations, the tales of silk and spice would continue to be told. The caravan had grown accustomed to shifting landscapes, sun-baked deserts, bustling towns, and lush valleys, but as they pressed further north, the world around them began to change. The warmth of the southern winds was replaced by a sharp chill, and the land stretched wide, vast, and open, a boundless plain covered in snow. This was the steppe, where winter ruled with a steady hand, and every breath of wind seemed to carry with it the voice of eternity. The snow crunched beneath the hooves of the camels, their heavy feet leaving shallow imprints on the frozen ground. Their breath rose in clouds of white mist, drifting upward and dissolving into the pale sky. The caravan members wrapped themselves in heavy cloaks lined with fur, their faces tucked away from the stinging wind. Even so, there was a serenity in the quiet vastness, a peace that seemed to wrap itself around them like the embrace of the earth. The horizon stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the silhouettes of low hills and the occasional dark line of trees. Above them, the sky was not the deep blue of summer but a pale silver gray, blending into the snow until it seemed as though the world was woven from two colors alone, white and gray. Yet in its simplicity, it was beautiful, as if the land had been brushed into existence with gentle strokes of silence. At night, when the caravan stopped to rest, the snow glittered under the moonlight, each flake shining like a tiny jewel. The fire crackled low, and its warmth was fiercely guarded, for the steppe winds could snatch away heat as quickly as it was made. Travelers gathered close together, sipping hot broth from clay bowls. The flavor of lentils and spice was simple, yet in the cold it tasted like a feast. The people of the steppe were different from those the caravan had met in crowded cities. They were horse riders, born to the saddle, moving with the rhythm of the land rather than the stone of streets. One evening, a group of them approached the caravan, their horses swift and sure-footed, their fur-lined coats blending with the snow. Their leader, a tall man with eyes as sharp as falcons, greeted the travelers with warmth, though his voice carried the strength of command. These horsemen offered shelter for the night in their circular felt tents, yurts that glowed with firelight from within. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant with the scent of wood smoke and milk tea simmering in large kettles. The travelers removed their boots, letting the warmth seep into their tired feet. Cushions of wool and skins lined the floor, and the walls were decorated with patterns that told stories of their ancestors. As they sat together, the hosts shared bowls of fermented mare's milk, a drink both sharp and soothing, passed around as a gesture of friendship. The air filled with laughter, even though words sometimes failed. For though their languages differed, gestures and smiles built bridges as surely as trade. That night, a storyteller among the steppe people recited a tale that had been passed down through generations. He spoke of a great eagle that soared over the frozen plains, carrying with it the spirit of the wind. It guided hunters to their prey, and when storms raged, it shielded them beneath its mighty wings. His voice rose and fell like the howl of the steppe wind, and the listeners, though weary, leaned forward, captured by the power of the story. Children peeked from behind their mothers' coats, their cheeks rosy from the cold, their eyes wide with wonder. Merchants from the caravan shared their own stories in return, telling of deserts where the sun painted the sand gold, and of faraway seas filled with ships heavy with spices. The room was quiet except for the voices and the occasional crackle of the fire, but within that quiet was a sense of unity, of strangers who had become companions, even if only for a night. In the morning, the world was veiled in frost. Horses whinnied softly as the riders prepared to lead the caravan part of the way. The steppe people rode with ease, their silhouettes cutting sharp lines against the pale horizon. Their horses, strong and enduring, were perfectly suited for the icy ground. Watching them, the caravan members marveled at how deeply life could adapt to such a place, a land so cold, yet so alive with resilience. The journey continued, and the caravan pressed further into the snowy expanse. Sometimes they moved for hours without seeing a single tree or hill, only the smooth sweep of snow stretching before them. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of hooves, the soft creak of leather harnesses, and the occasional call of a raven circling overhead. The stillness seeped into their hearts, calming even the most restless spirits. At night, the sky above the steppe revealed its hidden beauty. With no cities to dim them, the stars shone with breathtaking brilliance. They stretched in a shimmering arc from one horizon to the other, as if the heavens themselves were a great silken road above, mirroring the one below. The Milky Way glowed like spilled silver, and the travelers lay on their backs, gazing upward in hushed awe. Under that star-filled sky, they spoke softly of dreams, of reaching distant markets, of returning home with treasures, of reuniting with families waiting by the hearth. Some spoke of nothing at all, content to let the silence fill their hearts. The snow, the stars, the quiet breath of the horses nearby, all combined to create a peace so deep it felt eternal. And so, the snowy steppe, vast and endless, became another chapter in the journey. It was a place where the world seemed reduced to its simplest form: wind, snow, sky, and stars. A place where survival itself was an act of beauty, and where every story, whether told by eagle, horse, or human voice, was carried on the cold, timeless wind. The caravan had grown quieter as the days stretched onward. The desert winds had softened, and the mountains that once loomed tall behind them now seemed like distant memories. Ahead, the road was wide, unbroken, and seemingly endless, stretching toward horizons that shimmered with heat and promise. Travelers whispered that beyond those horizons lay lands even more mysterious, where cultures blended, and treasures unknown awaited discovery. The Silk Road was never just a path of stone and sand. It was a dream that expanded endlessly, much like the horizon itself. Every step forward carried the travelers deeper into lands of wonder, each horizon revealing another, as though the earth was unrolling a scroll of infinite stories. For the merchants, the horizon was hope, for scholars, it was knowledge, and for wanderers, it was serenity. By now, the caravan had traveled through deserts, mountains, rivers, and bustling cities. They had seen tapestries woven with golden threads, tasted fruits sweetened by distant suns, and carried silks dyed with colors that seemed to hold the glow of dawn itself. Each person had gathered not only goods but also memories, moments of laughter shared at firelit camps, soft songs carried on the wind, and the quiet companionship of the road. As they moved forward, the sky opened above them in vast blues during the day and endless starfields by night. There was something deeply comforting in the steady rhythm of hooves against sand, the rolling wheels of carts, and the murmur of voices sharing tales in many tongues. The road itself seemed alive, breathing with the footsteps of those who had walked it for centuries, guiding each traveler onward. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in fiery golds and purples, the caravan paused atop a gentle rise. From there, the view was endless, no walls, no mountains, no barriers. Just the vast plain stretching outward into eternity. The leader of the caravan, an older man whose eyes carried both wisdom and weariness, spoke softly, "This horizon is a reminder. There is always more beyond what we see." The road teaches us that endings are only beginnings in disguise. The travelers listened in silence, their hearts warmed not only by the firelight but by the quiet truth in his words. Many of them had begun their journey with trade in mind, focused on profits and goods. Yet somewhere along the way, they realized they were gathering something greater, the serenity of understanding how small their lives were against the vastness of the world, and yet how meaningful each step became when shared with others. That night, they set up camp beneath the open sky. Lanterns glowed softly, casting golden halos on the sand, while the stars shimmered above like scattered jewels. A musician strummed a gentle tune on a stringed instrument, and the melody seemed to drift into the horizon itself, as though carried by unseen hands. Conversations melted into soft murmurs. And even the restless animals seemed soothed by the quiet. One of the younger travelers, a scholar with ink-stained fingers, sat writing by the fire. His journal was nearly full, its pages holding sketches of temples, descriptions of markets, and musings on the people he had met. He paused, lifting his head to look toward the horizon. In the flickering light, he whispered, "The horizon is the greatest teacher, it always invites us forward, yet never lets us reach it. Perhaps it is not meant to be reached but simply followed, so that we keep moving, keep learning, and keep living." His words touched those nearby, who nodded in quiet agreement. In that moment, the caravan seemed less like a group of traders and more like a family bound together by shared miles and shared dreams. As dawn approached, the world was bathed in soft lavender light. The horizon glowed once again, this time with the promise of another day. The caravan packed their belongings, the air filled with the scent of morning dew settling upon the earth. As they resumed their journey, the horizon beckoned them forward, calm and eternal. Day after day, the same pattern repeated, footsteps, stories, and the endless horizon ahead. Yet it never grew dull. With every mile, new wonders awaited, birds with brilliant feathers, wildflowers blooming unexpectedly along the road, and strangers who carried new tales. Each horizon carried within it the serenity of discovery. And so, the Silk Road continued, not only as a path across lands but as a journey into the soul itself. The travelers carried with them not only silks, spices, and treasures but the serenity of knowing that the horizon never truly ended. It was infinite, like the dreams of those who followed it. As the sun set once more, painting the world in gold and rose, the caravan pressed onward, their silhouettes blending with the horizon. Beyond that line of light, there would always be more stories waiting, more friendships to be found, and more serenity to embrace. And as the stars returned to their watchful place above, the Silk Road whispered its timeless promise, that no matter how far one walks, there is always something beautiful waiting just beyond the horizon. The road stretched out like a ribbon of memory, winding through valleys where the air was soft and filled with the faint perfume of blossoms. By now, the caravan had crossed deserts, rivers, and mountain passes, leaving behind countless campsites and cities that now lived only in their recollection. Yet the journey was not forgotten, it lingered like an echo, soft but ever-present, shaping the way each traveler saw the world. For the Silk Road was more than stone and dust. It was a story told in footsteps. Each boot print pressed into the sand carried a tale of longing, trade, or simple wonder. The desert winds might sweep the marks away, but the memories remained, like invisible threads woven into the tapestry of the earth itself. One evening, as twilight settled gently over the horizon, the caravan paused near an abandoned way station. Its crumbling walls bore faded murals of merchants, camels, and traders who had passed long before. The stones seemed to breathe with history, whispering the laughter, songs, and struggles of those who had once sheltered there. The travelers walked quietly among the ruins, their own footsteps joining the countless echoes of ages past. A young boy, no more than 12, knelt near the wall and traced the painted lines with his finger. "Do you think they remember us too?" he asked softly. His father smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We remember them, and in remembering, they live on. One day, others will remember us. That is how the road never truly ends." The words sank into the hearts of the listeners. Around the fire that night, stories flowed like gentle streams. Each person spoke of a moment from the journey that had left an imprint on their soul. One merchant recalled the generosity of strangers who had shared bread with him when his provisions ran low. Another spoke of a musician in a distant inn whose melodies had lifted his spirit after long, weary days of travel. A scholar described the night sky above the desert, where the stars had seemed close enough to touch, and how that sight had filled him with a peace deeper than any temple. As each tale was told, the firelight flickered against the ruined walls, as though the old murals were listening. The silence that followed was not emptiness but fullness, the quiet recognition that their journey was one among countless others, and yet uniquely their own. When sleep came, it came softly. The desert cradled the caravan in silence, broken only by the low murmur of the wind. Dreams carried the travelers back to the places they had seen, to the friends they had met along the way, and to the lessons the road had whispered into their hearts. Morning arrived with the pale glow of dawn. Dew sparkled upon the grass, and the horizon stretched wide, shimmering with the promise of new miles ahead. The caravan rose slowly. Their bodies weary but their spirits lightened by the stories shared the night before. They knew that each step forward was not just a journey into new lands, but a continuation of echoes of footsteps that came before, and echoes that would linger long after. As the day unfolded, they passed through fields where farmers tended crops with care, their laughter ringing out as children chased one another between rows of wheat. The caravan offered greetings, and the farmers returned them warmly, adding to the long chorus of voices the road had carried for centuries. At midday, they came upon a small stone bridge arching over a clear stream. The water gurgled softly, carrying reflections of the sky upon its surface. Each traveler paused to listen, for the stream seemed to sing, a melody not unlike the voices of the countless people who had stood in that same place. They filled their flasks, washed their faces, and felt refreshed, as though the echoes of water carried away their weariness and replaced it with calm. By evening, the caravan reached another rise where they could see the road stretching endlessly ahead, fading into the glow of sunset. It looked as though the footsteps of the world itself had carved that path, winding ever forward, always inviting, always promising. The leader of the caravan lifted his gaze and said, "Every step we take is joined with those who walked before. We walk not alone but with their memories beside us." The words lingered as the stars appeared one by one. The fire was lit, meals were shared, and the night became a gentle embrace. The youngest of the caravan curled into their blankets, drifting to sleep as elders told tales of heroes, poets, and wanderers whose lives had once been bound to the same endless road. The echoes of footsteps, it seemed, were everywhere. In the ruins, in the stories, in the water, and in the very silence of the desert. They carried not only the weight of the past but the serenity of continuity. No step was ever truly lost. As the night deepened, the road lay quiet under the moonlight, yet alive with memory. And when dawn would come again, the caravan would rise once more, ready to add their own echoes to the eternal chorus of the Silk Road. The final stretch of the road lay before the caravan, shimmering beneath the gentle warmth of morning light. The path no longer felt like an endless trial of sand, stone, and distance. Instead, it seemed like an old friend, guiding them with a patient hand toward the horizon. Each step forward carried with it the weight of everything that had come before, the laughter, the struggles, the kindness of strangers, and the quiet nights beneath the stars. By now, the travelers no longer counted the miles. They measured the road instead by the memories it had offered. The river crossings, the mountain winds, the spices that had filled markets with fragrance, and the songs sung in faraway inns, all of it lived within them. The Silk Road had become more than a journey, it was a mirror of life itself, full of hardships, wonder, and gentle beauty. At midday, the caravan approached a vast city, its walls rising proudly against the horizon. The gates were adorned with carvings of dragons and phoenixes, symbols of prosperity and peace. Merchants, artisans, and wanderers flowed in and out like a tide, each carrying with them their own piece of the road's endless story. Bells chimed from towers, and banners fluttered in the breeze, welcoming all who arrived. The caravan entered slowly, their camels swaying gently, their faces glowing with relief and awe. Markets bustled with voices speaking dozens of tongues. Spices filled the air with warm fragrance, cinnamon, saffron, and cardamom blending together in a dance of scents. Silk shimmered in the sunlight, its folds catching the light like ripples on water. Jewels sparkled, pottery shone, and music floated above the crowds, played on instruments both familiar and strange. For some, this city would be the end of the road. They would sell their goods, trade their stories, and find rest among the winding alleys and shaded courtyards. For others, the road stretched onward, inviting them to continue their travels toward distant shores. But for all, there was comfort in knowing they had reached a place where so many threads of the world came together. That evening, the travelers gathered one last time beyond the city walls, where the grass stretched out like a soft carpet under the glow of twilight. They lit a fire and shared their final meal as a caravan. Bread was broken, tea was poured, and laughter rose gently into the night air. One of the elders stood and spoke with a voice as calm as the wind. The Silk Road has carried us far, but the road itself does not end here. For as long as people walk, as long as hearts carry hope, and as long as stories are shared, the road continues. Every step we have taken is part of something greater, something that stretches beyond sand and stone, beyond time itself. We are but one chapter in a story without end. The fire crackled softly, as though agreeing. Around it, faces glowed with peace. The youngest traveler, who had once asked if footsteps were remembered, now understood the answer. They had seen how memories lived in ruins, in songs, in kindness, and in the simple act of walking together. The echoes of their own journey would join those of countless others, forever part of the road. When sleep came, it came with ease. Dreams carried the travelers not into distant lands, but into the calm certainty that journeys never truly finish. They transform, they linger, and they live on in every heart touched along the way. At dawn, the group parted gently, each walking toward their own path. Some remained in the city, while others continued beyond its walls. Yet none felt sorrow. Instead, they carried with them the serenity of knowing that their steps, whether taken together or apart, belonged to the same great road. The Silk Road stretched on, a ribbon of possibility, shimmering under the endless sky. It whispered of adventures yet to come, of friendships yet to be made, and of stories waiting to be told by those who would follow. And so, the journey continued, not just for the caravan, but for the world itself. For every traveler who sets foot upon the path becomes part of its eternal song. The road is quiet now, resting under the gaze of the stars. But listen closely, and you can hear it still, the gentle echo of footsteps, carrying serenity through the ages, guiding all who wander toward connection, toward wonder, and toward peace.